The night air in rural Florida was heavy with silence, but it was the kind of silence that carried suffocating secrets. In the shadows of that quiet, a young boy named Seth Jackson had no idea that the person he trusted most would soon betray him. In the cruelest way imaginable. Seth was just 15 years old, a lanky, easygoing teenager with a passion for dirt bikes and a smile that seemed to light up every room he entered. To his family and friends, he was full of life, mischievous, funny, and sometimes hot-headed, but never malicious. And like most teens, he had fallen into the roller coaster of first love. That love was with a girl named Amber Wright. She was beautiful, charismatic, and fiery. Their relationship had all the turbulence of young passion, jealousy, breakups, makeups, and a constant stream of social media posts that revealed just how messy things had become. The relationship, however, wasn't just complicated, it was toxic. Friends often noticed the sharp exchanges between the two, the fiery arguments in person and the bitter words online. But beneath that teenage drama, no one could have predicted the depth of darkness brewing in Amber's heart. On April 17, 2011, Seth received a message from Amber. She wanted to meet. She wanted to talk things over. It sounded like a truce, maybe even a chance to fix what was broken. But the truth was far from reconciliation. Amber wasn't offering peace. She was setting a trap, and the boy who trusted her enough to step into the night would never walk out again. The tragedy of Seth Jackson's murder is not just about a crime, it is about betrayal, manipulation, and the horrifying reality of what happens when teenage heartbreak crosses the line into pure evil. And years later, when Piers Morgan sat across from Amber Wright in a prison interview, he stared directly into the face of a girl who lured her ex-boyfriend to his death at just 15 years old. But before that chilling confrontation, we must go back to where the story began, back to the toxic romance that turned fatal. It began like many teenage romances, intense, exciting, and impossible to ignore. Seth and Amber were drawn to each other in a way that made them inseparable at first. But soon, their love turned complicated. Their friends noticed the constant arguments, the back-and-forth messages online, and the dramatic breakups followed by emotional reunions. On social media, their posts told the story of two teenagers caught in a storm of emotions, one moment full of love, the next filled with anger. Their relationship had become a cycle, and with each fight, the tension grew. But while Seth's frustration often passed quickly, Amber's emotions began to run deeper, and she wasn't alone. Michael Bargo, a young man 2 years older than Amber, entered the picture. He carried a strong dislike for Seth and often fueled Amber's anger. Instead of calming things down, he encouraged it, convincing her that Seth was a problem that needed to be dealt with. Together with a small group of friends, Bargo began to form a plan. To them, it wasn't about reconciliation, it was about confrontation. And Amber's role was to bring Seth to the place where it would all unfold. On April 17, 2011, Seth received a message from Amber. She wanted to meet, to talk things over. To Seth, it seemed like an opportunity to fix what was broken, maybe even a chance to move past all the fighting. Some of his friends later said he hesitated, sensing it might be a setup. But hope and trust outweighed his doubts. He agreed to go. It was a decision that would lead him into the most dangerous night of his life. The house Seth walked into looked ordinary from the outside, a worn Florida home with nothing to suggest what waited inside. But for Seth, stepping through the door would change everything. Amber greeted him, her familiar presence lowering his guard. He believed this meeting was about reconciliation, about the teenagers trying to sort out their messy relationship. But within moments, the atmosphere shifted. From the shadows, others emerged. Voices were raised, tempers flared, and Seth realized late that he had been set up. He tried to defend himself, tried to understand why this was happening, but the odds were against him. Amber stood by as the chaos unfolded, whether she believed this was meant to scare him or something far more serious. Her silence spoke louder than words. She had brought him here, and she did nothing to stop what came next. The confrontation grew more intense until a line was crossed, one that could never be undone. By the time the night ended, Seith's life had been taken, and the people who once claimed to care about him had chosen a path of no return. In the hours that followed, panic set in. Instead of calling for help, those involved made desperate decisions to cover their tracks. The choices they made that night would not only destroy Seith's future, but also bind each of them to consequences that would follow for the rest of their lives. By morning, Seith was gone, and his family, still unaware of the tragedy, believed he was simply missing. The reality that their son had been betrayed in such a devastating way was a truth waiting to surface. The first cracks in the plan appeared almost immediately. Fear and guilt have a way of unraveling even the strongest secrets, and soon whispers began to spread within days. One of those involved couldn't hold back the truth any longer. Investigators started asking questions: a missing boy, unusual behavior among his peers, and rumors of a late-night confrontation all began to connect. Piece by piece, law enforcement uncovered signs that something far more serious had happened than a teenage dispute. When detectives sat across from Amber Wright, they were looking for answers. At first, she claimed she only wanted to talk to Seith, insisting she never expected anything else to happen. But the evidence told a different story: messages, testimonies, and the accounts of others who were there. Those in the room described Amber's demeanor as calm, almost detached. She wasn't the emotional ex-girlfriend many expected to see. Instead, she seemed removed, as though the gravity of the situation hadn't fully settled in. Meanwhile, Seith's family was left searching for hope. To them, he was still missing, and the idea that something terrible had happened was too painful to accept. His mother's pleas for answers reached news outlets across Florida, turning Seith's disappearance into a case that drew community outrage and heartbreak. The question that haunted everyone was the same: how could teenagers, children, and many people as eyes be at the center of something so devastating? And at the center of it all stood Amber Wright, only 15 years old, but now tied to a chain of choices that would lead her into a courtroom. The investigation was only beginning, but the road ahead promised even more shocking revelations. The courtroom was filled with silence, the kind of silence that carries the weight of expectation. Reporters filled the benches, cameras waited outside, and every eye was on Amber Wright. At just 15 years old, she was no longer the girl in a high school drama. She was now standing trial for one of the most shocking cases the community had ever seen. The prosecution described her as the key player, the one who lured Seith Jackson into danger. They showed text messages, witness testimony, and the timeline of events that led to the night. To them, Amber was not just a bystander, she was part of the plan. Her defense told a different story. They painted her as a teenager caught under the influence of someone older, manipulated by Michael Bargo, who had fueled her anger and taken control of the situation. She was young, they argued, too young to fully grasp the consequences of what she was stepping into. Day after day, the courtroom revisited the events, each detail adding to the picture of betrayal and tragedy. Families sat in the gallery, their faces heavy with grief and exhaustion. For Seith's loved ones, it was almost unbearable to hear the story of their son's final hours repeated again and again. When the jury returned, the air was thick with tension. Every word from the judge echoed like thunder. Amber Wright was found guilty of first-degree murder. The sentence was life in prison. For Seith's family, it was a moment of justice but not true peace. Nothing could bring back the boy they had lost, the laughter that once filled their home, or the future that had been taken. Amber, now a teenager facing life behind bars, left the courtroom with her fate sealed. The story was not just about her actions, but about the devastating ripple effects on Seith's family, on the community, and on every life touched by that one night of choices. The trial had ended, but the haunting questions remained. Prison walls are built to keep people in, but they cannot block out the world's curiosity. Years after the crime, Piers Morgan sat face to face with Amber Wright. the girl who had lured her ex-boyfriend into a trap when she was just 15 years old. The interview was tense. Morgan leaned forward, asking the questions everyone wanted answered. Do you accept responsibility for what happened to Seth Jackson? Amber shifted in her seat. She admitted to mistakes, admitted she was young and reckless, admitted that anger had clouded her judgment. But something felt missing. Viewers watching at home wondered if they were seeing true remorse or simply carefully chosen words. Morgan pressed harder. His voice cut through the silence of the room, challenging her to acknowledge the weight of her actions. Yet Amber's calm responses left a lingering unease, as though she still struggled to fully grasp the devastation left behind. For audiences, it was chilling. Here was a young woman, once caught in the storms of teenage jealousy and poor decisions, now speaking from a prison cell about the night everything changed. Amber Wright remains behind bars, serving a life sentence. Michael Bargo, the older teen who influenced the plan, sits on death row. The others who joined them carry long prison terms of their own. But Seth Jackson's memory lives on through his family, who continue to honor the boy they lost. They fight to ensure he is remembered not for the way his life ended, but for the way he lived, full of energy, laughter, and dreams. Still, as the story closes, one haunting thought lingers. How could a teenage relationship spiral into betrayal so deep that it cost a life? It is a reminder that even the smallest choices can carry consequences that last forever.